was taken to a police station. I was interrogated for 3 days, and I was being accused of murder and a series of robberies that had happened around the M25 over a period of one night. Early in the hours of the morning on the 18th of December 1988, I'm in bed, hear these loud noises. My best mate was with his brother downstairs. We were living in this two-part flat, and I was woken up by loud noises. Now, I thought it was my mate and his brother having an argument. So I got up, rubbed my eyes, lit a cigarette, went downstairs to find out what the fuck was going on. And I was met with guns being pointed at my face. So I had men at my flat door. I was watching my mate's brother being frog marched out of the flat. And I had these guns and men in balaclavas pointing these guns at me, telling me to get the fuck down on the floor. And I had this cigarette in my mouth, and I remember it distinctly. It was kind of burning down to the butt, so it was burning my lips. And I went to move my hands to move the cigarette, and all hell broke loose. They were screaming that they were going to shoot me if I didn't. So I hit the floor, and before I knew it, I had men all over me. My hands were put behind my back. They were handcuffed with these plastic cuffs, and then I was frog marched out of my flat. I only had on my boxer shorts. I was taken out of my flat, down some stairs, fell down the stairs. The police officers dragged me, and I remember seeing one of the other residents of one of the flats sort of flat on the floor with a police officer on his back. And he looked up at me and his eyes were terrified, you know, and that was a terrifying moment. They took me out of the flat and I was put into the back of a van, and my two flatmates, Michael and his brother, were in the same van. And then a police officer came into the van and he called my name. I identified myself and he told me to come out of the van. And then everything broke loose from there. I was taken to a police station. I was interrogated for 3 days in Surrey, Stockbroker Belt. And I was being accused of murder and a series of robberies that had happened around the M25 over a period of one night.
Wow.
That was the first I knew the allegations against me. And then I didn't see the outside for many years.
That's what I was going to say. When they've come and they've grabbed you and your life's like been fucking twisted up on its head, when you're being thrown into the back of that van, were these murders or this robbery, was that something that you'd heard about? Did you know about it, or did you have no idea what was going on when you were?
I had no idea. It was national news, so it was on the front page of all the national newspapers, The Sun, the News of the World, and all the kind of mass media broadcasters, the BBC and everything, that the police were hunting these. I found this out later. I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't pay any attention to the news. You know, I was a happy-go-lucky, fucking what I could when I could, smoking drugs and doing stuff like that. So no, at the time I was arrested, I had no idea what I was being arrested for. And although I'd had my brushes with the law and I knew that I was involved in criminality, I knew when guns were pointing at me on that particular occasion that this was far more serious. But there was this kind of, I don't know, this bounce about me at the time that I was still this cocky 20-year-old, 19-year-old. I was still cocky and thought like, this is nothing to do with me. It was terrifying and it was frightening. But it's when I was in the police station, when they were interrogating me and asking me questions about a murder and a series of robberies, I got even cockier because I knew I didn't do anything like that. So I didn't do that no comment thing that often happens or you see on television. No, I was prepared to tell them everything I could possibly tell them about who I was and what I was doing, and felt very confident about it. Didn't make any difference.
Wow, that's literally what I was gonna ask, because you knew you was innocent. I'd like to think if I was in that situation, I'd tell them everything, because obviously you've got nothing to hide.
Absolutely.
But so at what point in the process from that night you were arrested and obviously when you received the guilty verdict, at what point did it sink in that you might not be walking out of there again?
I think it was almost, I think it started when that police officer came to that van and called my name, because they'd already identified me for some reason. I didn't know it then, why. I mean, we found out many years later, but at the point I didn't know. But I think it all started then. When I was being interrogated by the police, they were not interested in my willing to tell them anything. As you say, if you were in that situation, you just kind of blab on where you've been, what you've done, who you've done, what you've done, even confess to things that you had done because you thought this is...
Like lesser crimes.
Lesser crimes. I mean, I wasn't quite doing that, but I was prepared to do that.
Yeah.
I think it was when it really dawned on me was after the first 2 days of interrogation, where I was being asked where I was, whether I was involved in the murder. And then I was kind of being accused of the murder and robberies, and it was serious crimes. And then a police officer said to me one day in the police station that they were taking me to another police station where I'd be charged with these offences. And I'm asking if anybody else has been charged. Why are you charging me? You know, it was a scary moment. And they did. They took me from that police station to another police station. They left me in the cell for sort of 24 hours. And I was sort of almost banging my head against the wall, terrified that they were going to charge me with these crimes. And then they did. They came into the cell, took me out of the cell, took me to the sergeant desk. And then they charged me, took my fingerprints, took pictures, did all that they do when they process somebody, and charged me with murder, 1 count of manslaughter or attempted murder, and 2 counts of aggravated robbery.
Wow.
You make that whole situation sound quite confusing, which obviously it is because you had no idea what was going on at the time. We did say that we did a bit of research on it before. Even reading into it, all looks very confusing how you even got involved as them thinking that you could have been guilty. Like each part we were reading through didn't seem to ever point towards you or another one who was also arrested.
That kind of detail doesn't materialise until the months go by. So when I was charged by the police, I still didn't know what it was they were accusing me of doing. Of course, I knew I was being charged with murder. I knew I was being charged with these other serious offences. And I knew that they were making allegations against me because often during the interviews, the police officers were saying to me that this person's saying this person's saying that. They didn't come into the interview and sort of say, we've got your fingerprints or your dabs all over the murder, or we've got this forensic evidence or anything like that, because that wouldn't have existed, didn't exist, never did exist. So it was always allegations, people pointing fingers at me and saying things about me, and that's all they were telling me at the time. So that's all I knew at the time. And then I'm charged with this murder. I'm put back in this cell, and as you can imagine, I go into this kind of munch scream kind of thing where my hand's in my head, and the nightmare had really begun.
Wow. When you're getting interrogated by the police, and that's the first time that you're learning of the details of the crime in which you're being told that you did, what can you go into any of the details of the crime? What actually was it? Was it something to do with the M25-3 gang?
Yes, it is. That's what we were called. We were called the M25-3. So it was this Kill for Kicks gang. So the crimes were this simple. Right. You had 3 men took a car that was stolen. They drove to the scene of the first crime, where they came upon 2 men in a car who were involved in sexual acts together. One was an elderly man, one was a young man. During the commission of trying to take their car, the elderly man was beaten, the young man was beaten, and they were tied up. The elderly man died of a heart attack during the commission of the crime. The 3 robbers then took their car and drove to the next crime. Same night, within an hour, they were arriving at another crime where they then broke into this house, attacked the occupants. The younger son in the house, who was in his 30s, he was stabbed and nearly died. They took jewelry and money from that property. They stole the car from that property, the 3 perpetrators, and they went on to another crime the same night within the hour, broke into another house and stole property from those houses as well. They took the 2 cars that were at the third offence, and those were the cars that were discovered the next day being burnt in a field somewhere in Sidcup or something like that. So that's the essence of what the crimes were. The murder at the scene of the first crime, the attempted murder and aggravated robbery at the second, and the aggravated robbery at the third offence.
Wow, that's so ruthless how they did it all in one fucking night.
One gang. The most crucial part of this was that when I hadn't been arrested here, so this happened on the 15th, 16th of December. Mm-hmm. In the newspapers the following day, all the details were about the police hunting this gang, which was now called the M25 gang because the crimes were committed around the M25 orbital. And the headlines were all that the police were looking for 2 white men and 1 black man from the very outset. We hadn't been arrested. And so, and this evidence was coming from the victims. And this is key because it's been key from the beginning to the end, which is why your interview with that copper resonates with me, because as he made clear during the 70s, people would be fitted up, especially people from...
A lot of racially motivated.
Absolutely. I didn't think about that at the time. As I say, I grew up in the world of black and white, so I didn't ever experience racism in that sense. But here I was in a police station being accused of crimes that 2 white men and 1 black man had committed. My 2 co-defendants, who ended up serving as much years in prison as me, were black as well. So in essence, what happened was the evidence was ignored because they wanted a conviction, and it appeased the media at the time.
How did you get involved in the case in the first place? Like, where did the police see everything that had happened and somehow get to you and your co-defendants?
To this day, we still don't have that information.
Oh my God.
We know what it is. What happened was, and this is the reality, what happened is the police had an informer who then told them that the people responsible for these crimes lived in this house, and that me and my best friend and another man were involved in these crimes. That's why they targeted our house.
As little as that.
It was as simple as that. He was a police informer, and he told them, and this has never been given to us,
Yeah.
but it came out because there was a huge reward, and there was a secret recording with this witness many, many years later on a BBC Rough Justice programme that were investigating my miscarriage of justice. And during that interview, he confessed to them that he was the one who sent the police to our house. Just turns out that he was the only witness in our case who was white, who had blue eyes and fair hair. And that's important for this reason. All of the victims from the crimes described one of the perpetrators as having fair hair and blue eyes. Now, we three black guys, as you can see, don't have blue eyes.
Yeah.
Okay? We didn't have blue eyes. But the victims, not just from one scene of crime, but from all the crimes, described the white man as being the leader, the blue eyes and the fair hair. I saw that protruding through his balaclava as I sort of came face to face with him. And those were the headlines, face to face with the Kill for Kicks gangs. Yet the police overlooked that and convicted us. And the only blue-eye, fair-haired man in my case was this one who sent the police to my address in the first place, which is why we were arrested.
Fucking.
That's mental. How would the police... I don't know how to say it, but it's fairly obvious just from that the police have gone in just because they want anyone to, well, in their minds...
I wouldn't say that's what happened. I think the police, at the beginning, they targeted the house because it was a house known to be housed by lots of sort of petty criminals, me and other people that live. It was a hostel, and most of the people that were there had been sent there from the probation service. No, what happened was the police, when they started to actually investigate the crimes, by now I'm charged. I'm in a prison within a prison in Brixton, and we'll get to that. But I'm talking about not just being in prison. I was in a prison within a prison with the most notorious prisoners you could come across. But during the investigation, and the police started to find evidence that pointed away from us, i.e. fingerprints found on the car at the scene of the murder didn't match any of us, but it matched the blue-eye and fair hair guy. We'd already been charged. So rather than go back and reinvestigate and question this individual, they then started to conspire with the witnesses to change their statements. I know that's complex, but it's very simple.
Yeah.
When the police found the evidence that pointed in another direction, they moved the goalpost to fit us in. So we weren't fitted up, and I distinguish between being fitted up, you get arrested, you get thrown into a police station, and you get fitted up, evidence is planted on you. No, that's not what happened in my case. What happened is the evidence started to point away from us being guilty.
Afterwards,
once they discovered it, they then started to move the goalpost.
It's like they found a key and then they decided which lock it was going to fit.
Yeah, something like that.
That's insane.
Yeah, because one of the things I read was that the fingerprints of two of the guys were found on the car, but then they just said that they were told to move it by you.
Yes. yes. But what you need to
But there's none of your fingerprints on the car.
And there wouldn't be because we weren't involved in the crime. But what they said about the fingerprints being found on the car and then saying that they moved it for us, they didn't offer that information to the police. It's only when the police found the fingerprints on the car and went back to them, and they'd given 3 or 4 statements by this point, when the police went back to them and said, your fingerprints were on the car, that's why I say they conspired with the witnesses, because they then got the witnesses, this is the police, I believe, they then got the witnesses to change their statements and say, oh, the reason my fingerprints were on the car is because Raphael and his co-defendants asked me to move the car. And that happened on numerous occasions. Evidence like property from the final robbery, from the 2 cars that I mentioned that were burned in a field, was found at one of his mates, the blue-eyed, fair-haired guy. The property was found at his girlfriend's flat. He put it in his girlfriend's flat. They didn't tell the police that. When the police discovered that bit of information, raided the girl's flat, he then changed his statement or made another statement and say, oh, they asked us to put it there. So every time the evidence pointed in another direction, they changed the goalpost. And that's why I say I was fitted up rather than fitted in. As the evidence pointed away, they then conspired to fit us in.